Virat Kohli will no longer be India's T20I captain after this autumn's T20 World Cup. Ben, did you see that's coming?
Uh, well, yeah, in that there's been reports of it going around. I suppose when you have a captain sort of as all encompassing, he, does so many things and is like so present as Virat Kohli, you can sometimes not really sort of envisage an end at all. I suppose it had to come sometime. In a way, I suppose it's a bit odd that he has telegraphed it ahead of time and that now there will be that theme running through it. Just gives sort of an extra little bit of pressure or narrative almost on that big occasion that this will be Kohli's last kind of chance to do it. Well, it's his first chance, but also his last chance to do it as T20I captain. But yeah, it's not a huge surprise considering what we've been hearing, but it is still always sort of like you almost don't believe it until it happens, kind of thing, I reckon.
Part of you kind of thought that if anyone was going to be able to captain in all three formats with the schedule as what it is, it would be Kohli. One thing that's quite interesting is that Kohli in November will be the same age that Alistair Cook was when he retired from Test cricket at the age of 33, which a lot of English fans in particular thought was premature. You still see people on Twitter saying, bring back Cook, etc. And in hindsight, a lot of people in English cricket think that Cook should have had some kind of sabbatical at some point to rest the mind as much as anything else. And when you think about it, no one really has the workload that Kohli has, captaining their side in all three formats, an IPL franchise. I know others do captain their side in all three formats, Williamson, for instance, but India plays so much cricket. And you've seen England have a rest and rotation policy over this year to look after the players' well-being. Ben Stokes is taking time out of the game to look after his own mental health. We've not had anything comparable from India, really. So this feels like quite a sensible decision from Kohli.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know exactly how much rest it will end up accounting for him. I suppose a little bit in that being captain is just an extra bit of pressure, but it doesn't seem like to be playing that much less cricket. He might rest for the odd T20 series here and there. It's also, although his record in that format, especially internationally, is brilliant, it is in a way the format where India could do without him the most. There are so many batsmen who come through the IPL, so it might be that they can afford to rest him a bit more, and even after this, sort of slowly phase him out with a view to perhaps him not being in the side by the next T20 World Cup, possibly, or possibly the one after that, because the next one is just next year. So the one after 2022, we might not see Kohli out. I think it's quite unlikely we'll see Kohli sort of do a Cook and sort of retire that prematurely. And you see a lot of Indian greats who just kind of go on and on and on, which I expect Kohli will do. I mean, there's no reason why he won't do. And I know there's been a small decline, but it's not been like, I think it does just feel like a blip rather than like the end sort of coming up. But this is sort of like the very beginning, I think, of what will be sort of like a very, very long end of Kohli's career that could take up the best part of a decade. But it's still weird to think that these kind of players who have been around for so long and been like so dominant for such a long time, that it does have to kind of end sometime, I suppose.
Yeah, I kind of saw this as a marker of him really wanting to prolong his career as long as possible, and wanting to continue playing for India and perhaps captaining India in Test cricket at least well into his late 30s. What do you think he'll benefit from relinquishing the captaincy? Because he's still going to play T20 cricket for India. He's still going to be playing a hell of a lot of cricket. What do you think the benefit of no longer captaining the T20 side will be?
Yeah, I mean, there is just quite a lot that goes in with being captain. I mean, people call him sort of jokingly, but sort of affectionately coach, don't they? But with a K on the front, because it's Kohli, in that he is sort of running the show. So he will be sort of like, and he's doing the press. He is the one that plays quite a big part in picking the players. I guess a lot of it will almost depend to what extent he's willing to let go in a way. Like, if he wants to, and he can just turn up and play and then go off again and then captain and run things in the ODI and the Test side, then that's fine. Then that will relinquish quite a lot. If he is still senior player, Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, I guess we'll talk about him in a second, if he is going to be the person to take over, it seems very likely that it will be him. If Virat's going to Kohli every time there's like a wicket that needs taken, or about like any selections and that sort of thing, then it might not be quite as much. He's just not that figurehead for the team. But it's also so hard to see an India team with Kohli in it and not see him being the figurehead. So I think how much it will allow him to relax is how much he lets it. And knowing Kohli, maybe not too much, but who knows?
Yeah, I can't really imagine Kohli on the back benches. He's been captain pretty much every game he's played in for the last 5 or so years. The last time he played for India without captaining was in November 2016 against New Zealand. But I guess people would have said very similar things about Dhoni in 2015, 2016. What you can't really imagine him not captaining, but we got used to that pretty quickly. I guess there aren't that many examples of teams splitting the white ball captaincy. There are lots of examples of teams having a red ball captain, a white ball captain, but there aren't that many examples of a team having a T20I captain and then a ODI captain. Do you think that will be easily manageable?
Yeah, I think so. If only because the formats are diverging that little bit more, especially with Indies. I think they have that very established ODI top three, but they're much more willing to sort of move it around in T20 cricket. We obviously have had the occasional T20 specialist captain like Stuart Broad for England, which is sort of ill-fated, but teams have tried it. But I think now, and especially with the place that T20 cricket holds in sort of like in the Indian cricket hierarchy, I think they see it as more of almost like a standalone thing, and it's more of like a thing to be just the T20 captain. I mean, that's where Rohit Sharma has carved a legacy really as like a brilliant captain is just in T20 cricket for Mumbai Indians, but he's still seen as a brilliant captain, which wouldn't have been the case 10 years ago. So I think it shows something about T20's place now that you can have a standalone captain for it and it not be seen as like far secondary to all the other things, I think.
Normally when a captain announces his impending resignation after 5 years in the job, people will be talking about what was his reign like, but I don't think you can really assess it. He's not captain India in a T20 World Cup yet, which is weird. There's been such a long gap between tournaments. Although his bilateral record is excellent. India played 17 bilateral series since he became captain. They've only lost 2, Australia at home in 2019 and West Indies away in 2017, but that doesn't really count because that was a one-off game, and that was a game where Evan Lewis went crazy and hit 125 not out in a chase of 192. But finally, how do you think India will go in the T20 World Cup? That is how the Kohli T20I captaincy legacy is going to be defined by. How do you think it will go?
Well, I mean, I think they're probably just about the favourites. They've obviously look at that squad, and there's so much talent there. They've picked a squad that's very attuned to what they think the conditions will be, which is interesting. But what we should also remember is that Kohli has an absolutely brilliant record at T20 World Cups. I think he's been the leading run scorer at the last 2 editions. There's just been a slew of just absolutely brilliant innings. There was obviously the Australia one where he played just such a controlled innings to chase down a big total, and then the knock against West Indies, which ended up being a losing cause. But he just made running twos into an art form in that tournament. And so I think if this is if Kohli gets spurred on by this to want to finish on a high and to assure his legacy as as a T20I captain, and that the T20I captaincy will be remembered by how they do in this tournament. If that spurs him on, and if all the other players, if some of the others have a good tournament as well, then they'll be very, very hard to beat, I think.
That's all we've got time for. We'll be talking about Kohli's resignation in greater depth for the next Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast, among other things, including Lasith Malinga's retirement from international cricket.